listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast, the most listened to daily Miami Dolphins podcast on the internet.
Miami's got the Dolphins, the greatest of all.
Come on, Dolphins fans. Time to fins up.
We're in the air, we're on the ground, we're always in control. And when you say Miami, you're talking Super Bowl. Cause we're the Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins #1. Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins #1.
Good morning, Miami Dolphins fans, and how are you today? And thank you for listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast. I am your host, Tom Ernessy, on New Year's Eve. That's right, New Year's Eve. We are going to talk about the fallout from the Cleveland Browns game against the Miami Dolphins, of course. We're going to get into Mike McDaniel's press conference. We're going to talk about Tua Tagovailoa and his update on his injury to his hip. We're going to talk Terron Armstead's injury. Even getting into the Chiefs and Broncos preview and what has been said so far leading up to that game. And, of course, previewing the Dolphins' own game against the Jets from MetLife Stadium. All that and more on today's DolphinsTalk.com podcast. But before we get into any of that, I want to give a big shout-out to everyone listening over at FinHeaven.com, the largest Miami Dolphins message board on the internet, and also everyone listening over at the Facebook group, I Am a Miami Dolphins Fan, run by the great and talented Carlos Hernandez. If you are on Facebook, be sure to check out the I Am a Miami Dolphins Fan Facebook group. Also, from our sponsor, Caneswear. Caneswear is the place to go for officially licensed apparel for the Miami Dolphins, Miami Heat, the Miami Hurricanes, Florida Panthers, and all of the professional and college teams in South Florida. Looking for the latest jersey, a birthday gift, or the newest hat to hit the market of your favorite South Florida team? Check out Caneswear for their overwhelming selection of sports apparel. Located at 2655 South University Drive in Davie, Florida, and Caneswear has it all. Not in South Florida? No worries. Visit Caneswear.com to shop their inventory from the comfort of your home, and they'll ship it to you. International fans, too. Caneswear.com is the spot that Miami fans shop. That's Caneswear.com. Caneswear.com. All right, I'm going to open this show with a new segment I would like to call Word Salad. Word Salad from Miami Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel in his press conference on Monday opened with the question from the media on Tua Tagovailoa. It was asked I know you said that it was determined that he would be at risk of much more significant injury if he had played against the Browns. Wouldn't that risk still exist if he plays as early as next Sunday or a potential playoff game? Word salad answer. It's all about time, and I think that was tricky is we were basing all of our timelines with this particular unique injury to Tua and how his body would respond to that based upon the previous week. So then with really the change in momentum or trajectory of it getting better, I think it was about the timing of when the game was relative to his recovery process from last week, which was a different timeline than the week before. So where does that leave us? Firmly in the unknown. Just because all right, you have this one sample size. Okay, Jesus Christ, I'm not reading all that. There was a lot of optimism last week in my mind based upon the previous experience. So this week, I know one thing, Snoop will get more reps than Tua this week as we go through the week and have to be prepared for both guys to play because I don't really know exactly what it's going to look like this next Sunday. So that's really the optimism. We are kind of in a gray area now of just how his body did not cooperate with my agenda. All right. Like I said, it's word salad for Mike McDaniel. Let me break this down for you. Tua clearly is hurt more than we were led to believe leaving the games against Houston and San Francisco. He played through the injuries. The hit that took place against Houston, and then it was said in another word salad that the other time he was hit was around midfield against the San Francisco 49ers, which aggravated it further. Tua did finish the game, as the hit happened in the first half. Now, we again were led to believe he was a limited participant in practice throughout last week, and ultimately they declared him doubtful on Saturday. So Tua said his hip was fine, nothing to worry about on Thursday. Frank Smith seemed that it was also the case, that Tua was going to be fine to play. The Dolphins held him out based on what they received from the team's training staff. Now, there was conversation on the postgame show and obviously throughout Saturday and Sunday about Tua gutting it out, playing through the injury. If the hip isn't broken, he should be playing. That was per my co-host Mike Oliva here at the DolphinsTalk.com podcast, that if it wasn't falling off or wasn't required to have surgery, Tua should have been playing. I was on the opposite end of that spectrum. We don't know the true severity of the injury. We never know the severities of these injuries until it is reported. Either the person is put on injured reserve, they're going on PUP, whatever it might be. So we don't know the severity of the hip, but it's bad enough that Tua did not play on Sunday and they held him out. So again, it is the same hip that was surgically repaired with the injury that he suffered in Alabama in 2019, in the 2019 season. He hasn't had issues with the hip since he became an NFL starting quarterback in 2020. But clearly he took a good enough shot right in the right spot that it is causing an impingement on his hip. Should we be laying waste to Tua Tagovailoa because of the injury? No, I don't think so. But again, the point is proven that the best ability of any NFL player is your availability, and unfortunately Tua has now missed his 5th game of this season, and his only season was 2023 where he stayed healthy. Dolphins hand him that big contract. The Dolphins cannot get out of this contract, especially because they are in quote-unquote a win-now mode. In continuing the conversation, word salad number 2 from Mike McDaniel, the question, who was the final say in whether Tua would play? Who had the final say against Cleveland? Who will have the final say this week? McDaniel's word salad answer, well, I think with injuries it's pretty cut and dry. 100 times out of 100, if someone's not medically cleared to play, I don't trump that card. I suppose on game day, I guess by the letter of the law, you could say it's my final say. My final say is to choose to listen to the medical professionals with their expertise and knowing the pros and cons, and that's the only thing responsible to do with players. And then realistically, those conversations, Chris and I get debriefed, and sometimes more than other times, depending on the injury in question. But that with our medical team and the doctors that are experts in the field, but to play for the Miami Dolphins, you have to have medical clearance to do so. And when doctors tell you that a player is not safe to play football, we don't ever deviate off that. That would be extremely irresponsible on my part. Okay, so we know the final say is coming from Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel. So when they received the information on Tua's hip on Saturday, they said that, hey, this is going to be worse. He may not be able to protect himself. He may not be able to function in the pocket with that hip injury. We need to put him to doubtful, so they decided to do so. Whether Tua went to them and said, I want to play, I guess it really doesn't matter what the player wants because it is ultimately the decision of Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel. He was followed up with the question, and the doctors told you that Saturday that he was not able to play. His response, you get updates all week, and you're trying to figure out what's going to look like on Saturday, and it looked bleak. But officially with zero ambiguity, on Sunday morning we knew. But that was based upon Saturday's information. All right, it's going to have to really take a turn. And when we saw it didn't. There you have it. So, for me, Tua gets a benefit of the doubt. that the hip injury is more significant than we anticipated, but it sucks once again that when it matters most, he's unable to play. I'm not knocking Tua. As many of you know who have listened to this podcast for the last 5 years, maybe even 6, because I was on Tank for Tua, that it is what it is at this point. I'm a big supporter of the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins, whether it's Tua, Snoop Huntley, whatever. It just sucks that our quarterback, who helped lead this team back to even have this chance to get into the playoffs, is unavailable when it matters most. Mike McDaniel was asked about Terron Armstead and if he was out for the season. Once again, pulled out of the game and then ultimately ruled out against the Browns. Said no. He's going to see what he can do and will approach the week with the mindset of getting Patrick Paul ready to start, but allowing Terron Armstead to see if he can get himself ready to play and be live for both scenarios. I love multiple scenarios, if you can't tell. Ha ha ha. There he is, jokester. Little more optimism here on Jaylen Waddle. He was asked about Waddle's condition. He said he had a good week. I think if the circumstances would have been different, it was a kind of a recipe for disaster on the playing surface relative to his injury. We'd be begging for not only a re-aggravation, but probably early in the game. So I feel optimistic about him, but we'll progress that day by day. So good news regarding Jaylen Waddle and the possibility of him playing against the Jets. We'll see how it goes, as he was questionable going into the game, ultimately ruled out. All right. That is the word salad of the show. Let's get into Chiefs and Broncos. That is obviously an obvious topic that we do have to talk about. And the reason we need to talk about this is because this is the part 2 of the Miami Dolphins making the postseason, is the Kansas City Chiefs beating the Denver Broncos this coming Sunday. Now, the Chiefs are resting majority of their starters. It was already discussed that Patrick Mahomes will not play in this football game, which is something unique because, in the past, really over the last 5-6 years, when the Chiefs did get a first-round bye, Mahomes and company did play a little bit of their final game just to keep them kind of game ready. But Mahomes is dealing with an injury, and he is going to get more rest for the quote-unquote ankle sprain that he has. And I put in quotes because, let's be real, folks. Let's be real. So according to Peter Schrager, Mahomes is not suiting up for Week 18. He added that Carson Wentz will start, and the Chiefs are likely to promote practice squad quarterback Chris Oladokun, giving the 27-year-old signal caller a chance to play against Denver. Schrager said, I'm told Mahomes is not going to play. Carson Wentz is going to start, and I'll go one step further. They're going to elevate this other guy, and he might get snaps in the game. Schrager went on to say that the Broncos will face mostly backups. So, that sucks. Being a fan of the Miami Dolphins, as this is your only clear-cut scenarios, beating the Jets and the Chiefs beating the Broncos in Denver, and they're going to have to do it with backups. Now, there have been moments in the past that a team's backups can win a football game when it matters most, even though they don't need the win per se. And I have a clear-cut example of this game, of a scenario like this. And it happened in January of 2004. And in the 2004 season, it was January 2nd, 2005. The game was played The Pittsburgh Steelers went into the game in Buffalo 14-1, locked in the 1 seed, were not playing any of their starters. The Bills sitting at 9-6, needing to win to just get in, or a win or tie to just get into the playoffs that season. The Pittsburgh Steelers benched all their starters, their main starters, and some unknown players made tremendous impacts in this game. Tommy Maddox, terrible. He had a 43.8 rating. Willie Parker, remember him? Big game. Antoine Randall L. Remember him? 7 catches, 81 yards in that football game. Long story short, the game was played predominantly by backups for the Pittsburgh Steelers on offense and defense. They went into Buffalo and won the game 29-24. For a game where the Bills needed to get into the playoffs with a win or a tie, they were in the playoffs. They lost. They blew it. Is that the recipe for the Denver Broncos? I don't know. I think the Broncos are a decent football team. But with Lady Luck riding with the Kansas City Chiefs all season long, one would have to imagine or hope, as Miami Dolphins fans, that the backups for the Kansas City Chiefs can find a way to beat a fully loaded and ready Denver Broncos team in Denver. It is a tall task, folks. It is a tall, tall task. But the biggest thing that needs to happen, first and foremost, is the Miami Dolphins have to go into New York and beat the Jets in the Meadowlands. So when talking about the Jets, they were absolutely obliterated by the Buffalo Bills in Orchard Park. Now, with that being said, the big story out of that game, in my opinion, was Aaron Rodgers pulled himself out of that game when it was 33-0. Now, we don't have any reports out just yet. Might have to check in with my buddy Antoine Staley from the New York Daily Post. I think there is a potential chance that Aaron Rodgers may not even see the field, let alone play the entire game against the Miami Dolphins on Sunday. I think there's a chance, albeit, again, my opinion and small chance, that they may start Tyrod Taylor instead and maybe sit some of the other big-name players for the Jets because they're really not playing for anything. And best case scenario, the Jets end up getting a top 5 pick with a loss. So they have no value benefit. Obviously, keeping the Dolphins out of the playoffs is something that they would look forward to based on the recent dominance the Dolphins have over the Jets. But the Dolphins have their own fish to fry, no pun. They still have to have Kansas City take care of business. So the Dolphins go to MetLife TakeOver to take on the Jets. Snoop Huntley probably at this point, get say a 90% chance we're going to see Snoop Huntley for one more game. And if the Dolphins win and the Chiefs win, the Miami Dolphins head to Orchard Park to play the Buffalo Bills in the first round of the playoffs. Boy, we got a lot to get into for the week, but I want to appreciate everyone for listening. Be sure to go to DolphinsTalk.com every single day for all the latest Miami Dolphins news and information. Be sure to follow me on all social media platforms at DolphinsTalkTom. The main account on all social media platforms is at DolphinsTalk. And we're going to have shows all throughout the week previewing both the Miami Dolphins and New York Jets, also talking Kansas City and Denver. As more news becomes available, we will have it for you here at Dolphins Talk. Thank you all for listening. I am out. Everyone have a great New Year's Eve. Everyone be smart. Enjoy your evenings. And have a happy New Year. Fins up.
Thank you for listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast. Be sure to visit DolphinsTalk.com every day for all of your latest Miami Dolphins news.